Have you watched the new Joker film? In today's video, we'll explore why we feel sympathy for Arthur Fleck, the Joker, and we'll also try to break down the character from a psychoanalytical perspective. Joaquin Phoenix won the Oscar for playing the Joker, and the movie got also another award for Best Music. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design,
and Best Director. Don't forget to say Best Director, sorry, and here is your water.
Why are you interrupting me?
Because you forgot to say Best Director, it's important.
Yeah, but I'm trying to make a video here.
Yeah, no, but it's important, man. Best Director, and I also brought you some water.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe that liking or not liking a movie is irrelevant. The question about a movie is, how did it make you feel? Hi, I'm Dimitris, and welcome to another video of Design Thyself. So let's try to break down the film and the character. Empathy is the cornerstone of psychotherapy. Empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. When watching the life of Arthur Fleck, you're surprised as you find yourself feeling empathy for a character that never experienced empathy from anyone. You start feeling empathy for Arthur from the very first scene. You see a guy that has faced an injustice while he's trying to do his job. He gets ridiculed and beaten up by those kids. That's his whole life over there, from the very first scene. And let me ask you this. How many times have you faced an injustice in your working environment? See, the movie is playing really well with feelings and situations we have all faced. Later on, when he reflects on the incident, we hear him saying that those who beat him up were just kids. That's the second time you might feel empathy for him. Because now he shows empathy for a situation that was clearly unfair. From a psychoanalytical point of view, this is where it all begins. When Arthur is going through a mental distress, but then says, they were just kids. He's doing something that we call minimization. So minimization in a nutshell is when you're having a traumatic experience and you cannot escape from it. Many times what happens is that we tend to minimize it. We tend to make it smaller in our mind so that we can cope with it, so that we can deal with it. We tend to laugh about some things, even though they still might hurt. We try to make other things sound insignificant, despite the fact that they cause so much pain. We think that it's gone, but it never really is. And that's what he's doing there. We see him show extreme empathy towards his mother.
The mailman's thrown them away.
Mom, why are these letters so important to you?
The type of kindness he shows his mother when he's helping her to have a bath, or even the way he speaks to her, the voice that comes out, helps us connect with a mature boy that all he wants is just to receive some love back. We see his human side in his need to connect to others, when, for example, in the bus, he tries to make this kid laugh. And then we feel more empathy for him when the kid's mother tells Arthur off.
Can you please stop bothering my kid?
We also see him show empathy for his colleague Gary when the other clowns are teasing him. He showed humor and a desire to connect with young Bruce when he gives him flowers and tries to make him smile. Adding these instances together starts to develop our empathy for him and provides a background for us to care about him. Arthur says something really beautiful. He says that the worst part of having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. And many mental health sufferers resonate with that 100%. Arthur clearly felt that he wasn't seen or understood in some key points in the movie. His boss told him off for losing the sign, and he cries, "Did you not hear? I got mugged." This was an authority figure who believed the worst in him. And I'll be surprised if you watched the film and at that point you didn't just want to jump to his side and defend him. But again, the brilliance in that scene is that even when his boss tells him that if he doesn't return the sign, he'll fire him, Arthur is looking at him frozen, with a painful smile on his face. And that is the point in the movie where a psychoanalyst starts to understand how deep the trauma in his psyche is. Here's what I mean. Every time we face a threat, we tend to respond with a fight or flight mechanism. If the trauma goes really deep, what tends to happen is that we get in a freeze mode when we face a threat. A genuinely overwhelming and paralyzing freeze response occurs only when fight or flight are not available to us. It's when we have been so overpowered, so overwhelmed and so trapped that there's no other option available to us. So we do what a number of animals do in a situation of extreme threat and no escape. We play dead, to the point that even our mind goes blank. And this happens for a number of reasons. One of them is that our body subconsciously saves energy for when the danger passes. Another one is that we don't want to look a threat when we're at the mercy of someone else. One more is that when we're in a freeze mode, our attentional systems get shut down so that we do not process what is happening to us. The event is so shocking, so overwhelming, so unbelievable that we experience a blank point where intense emotions prevent us from encoding information about the trauma we are experiencing. This is also the reason why Arthur does not remember his childhood traumas. They were so intense, so painful, that his brain had to freeze as they were happening. And that is the reason why the moment of his frozen smile is so important, because it shows us how deep his trauma is. Back to connection. When he visits his social worker, he is frustrated at not being heard. He says, "No one hears me. You never listen.
You don't listen, do you?
You always ask me the same questions."
I don't think you ever really hear me.
He feels no connection with anyone. He meets Wayne in the toilets, who he thinks is his father, because he just needs a little warmth.
I don't want anything from you. Maybe a little bit of warmth, maybe a hug, Dad.
He longed for a hug instead of ridicule from the talk show host, and even has a delusion where Mary Franklin tells him,
"I'd give it all up in a heartbeat to have a kid like you."
He fantasizes having a back rub from his neighbor when his mother was hospitalized. We can see his yearning to be heard, to be understood, to be empathized with. And he feels that no one can see his suffering. How many of you have felt this exact same way? In Arthur, we can see a boy who is deeply sad and confused. His job contradicts his feelings, that's why he hides behind makeup. All his life, he has been beaten up by others, physically and emotionally. He returns home day by day to take care of his mother, who couldn't take care of him when he was a little boy. A mother who raised him in a distorted reality. And as I was watching those scenes, I was thinking, how many of us have been saying that things are okay, even though they have been terribly wrong? We see that Arthur is deeply confused about what's real and what's fantasy. In the scenes where he's alone, Arthur is naked, which is a great contrast to his daily life where he hides behind a mask. There's no sense of identity, only emptiness. He brightens this emptiness by adding color with makeup, and his deep inner agony by adding a fake smile on his face. The mask is emphasized even more with these crazy outbursts of laughter. Every time we see Arthur trying to make an attempt to go outside of his inner agonizing world, even with his clown mask on, we see these uncontrollable bursts of laughter dragging him back into his inner abyss. People perceive Arthur's laughter as a disease or a condition of the brain, but from a psychoanalytical point of view, this can be a defense mechanism. We know that Arthur was severely neglected and abused as a child, but his mother, who's the main source of his pain, has been telling him that he is a happy child and that he was born to bring happiness to this world. His brain has hardwired suffering and sadness with agonizing laughter attacks. In the hospital scene, we see flashbacks of Arthur's delusional mother. We see when she was interviewed by the psychologist that she says that Arthur was a happy child.
He's always been such a happy little boy.
But we know that she completely ignored his pain.
I never heard him crying.
This pattern repeated out in Arthur's reality, and as he got older, he felt that the world did not see or hear him. This because parents play such a huge role, not only in our perception about our world, but also in our perception about who we are. We can see how terribly confused anyone at that age would be. I'm sad, I'm suffering emotionally, I'm suffering physically, but mom tells me I'm happy and she expects me to be happy. And this is what causes the dichotomy in Arthur's character and the duality of his personality. What's inside does not align with what is outside. So little Arthur goes on to choose a job that aligns with this vision of the world where on the outside he looks happy and he tries to make others happy, but on the inside there's a great deal of suffering. The crazy laughter is a defense mechanism on overdrive. His body gives an outburst of fake happiness to satisfy his mom, but at the same time is a cry that says, I'm doing what you expect me to do, but there's something wrong with this. Please help. I don't want this. This is what the laughter says. The laughter also protects Arthur from the outside world and keeps him from it, forcing him back into his inner chaos. The child within perceives the world as deceitful and brutal, so with the laughter it pushes it all away. Because both he and his mother are having delusions, it's very difficult for Arthur to tell what's real and what's not. His mother tells him that he's the outcome of a romantic affair with the most powerful and famous man of the city. This vision comes crashing down at the hospital when he finally learns the truth, that his mother was psychotic, that he was adopted, and that he was abused by her boyfriend and neglected by her. The distraction of the world he has believed in leads to confusion about what he can and cannot rely on, and what might hurt him, which leads to extreme sadness and then extreme anger. By a sad twist of fate, self-defense propels Arthur into his first two murders. A young girl is being harassed on the train by three men who are being sexually provocative to her.
Hello?
When you watch the movie, you cannot but feel angry towards them and worried about the girl and about what might happen to her. Empathy kicks in again, and Arthur's laughter comes to her defense.
Is something funny, asshole?
Arthur's laughter, the defense mechanism his body has created when a situation is too painful and he is called to act. Now the three men, they have a new target.
Sending voicemails.
They start tease him and then beat him. His gun goes off and kills two of the men. That is the point where we see something switching inside of him. That is the first time in Arthur's whole life where he feels that he has the power to stand up for himself. His mother is next. His mother has lied to him his whole life, and on top of that, she's not the angel he thought she was. She was incredibly abusive to him, and he kills her too. There's an interesting point before killing her where he says, I thought my life was a tragedy. Now I realize it's
a fucking comedy.
As the story goes on, we see more killings. He kills Randall, his ex-colleague who lied to their boss about the gun.
Sense, you know what I mean? Thank you, Randall. Thank you so much.
I just want to...
And that was the most brutal scene in the whole film. The last killing happens on live TV, after he has established to the entire world himself as the Joker.
Can you introduce me as Joker?
He expresses his views about how awful society has become and how everyone treats everybody unfairly.
Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy.
And after being humiliated on television by Murray Franklin, he kills him too. And there's one point I want to focus here, and that's his body language after he kills Murray. His leg goes up and down like crazy. There's a lot of energy in his body. There's no more freeze response. He has been replaced by a fight response. Fight against everyone and everything. We explored earlier how and why we go into freeze mode when we experience a traumatic event. And we said that one of the reasons is to save energy. Now we have to pause for a bit and talk about anger. Anger is a healthy feeling to have when we express it at the right time and with the appropriate intensity. For example, if I were to come that close to your face, literally that close, you'd probably feel uncomfortable. And now let's imagine there is a wall behind you, so you cannot escape. In other words, there is no option for a flee response. What would you do then? An instinctive response would be to push me away. The act of pushing someone away is an act of anger, because I'm not respecting you, I have crossed the boundaries, and you're pushing me away to re-establish the balance. Now, in that case, anger is protecting you. It's being expressed in the present moment with the appropriate intensity for your survival. Now, if we think about the times when we get angry, thinking about things that happened in the past, or when we get angry because we think about scenarios that might unfold in the future, in that case, anger is not healthy because it's not happening in the present moment, therefore it cannot act as a defense mechanism for your survival. All it happens is that it keeps energy trapped in your body without any form of release. Now let's go back to when I was that close to your face. If I would ask you, what's the feeling that you're having? What exactly do you feel? Most people would say fear. And as we know, fear promotes anger. But we also know that sadness counteracts anger. And that's exactly where Arthur finds himself into. On one hand, for his entire life, his sadness was counteracting his anger, but when all the anchors that were keeping him grounded disappear, immediately there's fear kicking in. Therefore, extreme anger to protect him, because it acts as a survival mechanism. There's an area in our brain which is called posterior insula. One of its roles appears to be in the recognition, intensity encoding, localization, learning, and memory of somatically painful events. And there's another area right next to it which is called anterior insula. Anterior insula provides an emotional context to our physiological experiences. In other words, it gives emotional meaning to our bodily states. So for example, it helps you experience pain as something unpleasant. And it also sends signals to our sensory motor network. So when we experience a traumatic event, what happens is that the posterior insula encodes it as something traumatic, the anterior insula gives it an emotional context, and then it also sends signals to a sensory motor network for us to fight or fly. So when Arthur was a little boy, chained and abused by his mother's boyfriend, he didn't have the option to fight or fly. He didn't have the option to push back and define his boundaries. His only option was to freeze. And this is what made sense back then, because it was the only option that would keep him alive. So the part of his brain that is designed to react to traumatic events got locked down. There was no motion, no reaction. But the other part of his brain, which is designed to encode the somatically painful events, was working like crazy. And there was all this energy trapped in without any release because of the frozen state. Let me ask you this. Have you been in a situation where you sit and you move your leg up and down like this? Or maybe biting your fingernails or fidgeting with your fingers? Maybe you're in the office, in a meeting where you don't want to be, and you start moving your leg up and down. Or maybe you're on a date and you feel uncomfortable, so you're fidgeting with your fingers. Or maybe your spouse tells you off and you're biting your lip or clenching your teeth. It's all the same thing, and I'm sure we've all been there one way or another. It's trapped energy wanting to be expressed. Joker does the same thing the moments before and right after he kills Mary Franklin. He moves his leg up and down furiously. And this anger, this energy, is not about the present moment. It's about not expressing it when he should have had, when he was being abused by his mother's boyfriend. The present situation, the humiliation on live TV, it just triggers it. The thing that makes him express his anger disproportionately is not about the trigger, it's not about the present moment. It's all about the hidden explosive ammunition that was hiding there for so many years. There's a quote by Sigmund Freud that says, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They're buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." And that's exactly what is happening to Arthur here. Boys usually learn how to become men from the male figures in the house, normally the father. In this situation, the male figure of the house, mom's boyfriend, is abusive, brutal, and aggressive. And that's exactly is what Arthur becomes when Thomas Wayne is an option that's no longer available. So he takes on the only male figure that he knows, the violent, the ruthless, while at the same time he's wearing a smile to make his mother happy. Even though throughout his journey Arthur could have made different moral choices, in the end he becomes who he was raised to be, not who he was born to be. A victim of his parents' actions, emotionally numb and tormented, with a huge fake smile on for his mother and the outside world. He believes the world to be an evil lie, and that's why it's only natural for him to want to hurt and kill. I found the closing scene phenomenal. The Joker, on top of the police car, after having danced in front of the crowd, he notices blood on his face, and with his fingers he draws a big bloody smile with tears in his eyes. That scene says it all. How many times you were feeling so sad inside and people were telling you, stop being so soft and snap out of it. Others have it worse than you. Seriously? Come on, stop being so dramatic. How many times someone asked you, hey, how are you? And you replied, I'm fine, and you? While deep inside you were so sad. And that is what the smile made of blood and tears in the eyes are about. We've all had it one way or another. That's why we sympathize with Joker. And that's also why this movie is so difficult to watch. Because the line between good and evil gets really blurry. If you found yourself having sympathy for the Joker and saw some similarities on a personal level between you and the character, know that you're not alone. If you feel alone, lonely, beaten, bullied, and you have this longing for connection, know that it doesn't end here. Therapy is here to help you challenge the beliefs you might have about yourself and the world. If Arthur had the proper support, he could have challenged his own beliefs at several points throughout his journey. When we experience hardships in life, we tell ourselves a story to make sense of the pain. But this story is written by the defense mechanisms that were formed as we're growing up. And those same defense mechanisms we later call our personality. But you have to remember, this is not who you really are. This is who you were raised to be. And you have the power to change that story. Recovering from trauma is challenging. And to go through it, you'll have to go back to remember it and understand it. Knowing that you're not alone is incredibly powerful in keeping you going on the tough days. Feeling that you're understood, heard, and have your emotions validated is the only key forward in not to get caught into unhealthy beliefs about yourself and the society you live in. The world changes only when we change. If you like this video, click the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I share videos around psychology, psychotherapy, and on how to live a well-lived life. I'm Dimitris. Thanks for watching, and remember, never put a smile on when your eyes want to cry. Talk about it. In defense of people with mental illness, I want to read you a statistic from the US mentalhealth.gov. Most people with mental illness are not violent, and only 3% to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals living with a serious mental illness. In fact, people with severe mental illnesses are over 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population.